Every single branch of the military has a creed. All of their ideals, or the distilling the essence of their ideals and what they're about and what's important and who they should be and how they should act into one document. And they read it every single day until it's drilled into your head. And the things that you're reading and saying start to impact and influence how you are on your day to day. And so words matter. If you are chock full of negative words, if you are pessimistic or just having a lot of intrusive thoughts that aren't helpful, then how does it not impact your emotional state and the way that you treat other people and yourself and the way you act and behave?
Welcome to this episode of Coach Noah Talks, where I have the pleasure of speaking with Michael Gerson, assistant professor at National University, owner of Transcend Performance, and director of mental skills at Mission 60. He has worked with a diverse range of soldier-athlete clinical populations in the field of performance, sport, military, health, and clinical psychology. I'm excited to have him on the show to share his insights and knowledge. What are some of the misconceptions that you find athletes and performers have about mental skills training and mental performance?
There's really two, I think, the two big heavy hitters are that performance enhancement techniques or working with a mental skills coach means that somehow I'm broken, somehow I'm deficient, somehow there's something wrong with me. And that's just simply not the case. And the other one is that mental skills are for weak-minded people. I'm just pulling myself up by the bootstraps, or I don't need all that California hot tubbing, banging on the bongos, lighting incense. I'll just do it myself. And the funny thing is, you get them in the room and they're pushing against you. But once you show them that they, in fact, have been using mental skills their entire life, just weren't aware of them, and a lot of times they become your biggest advocate. And it's important to be able to demystify what mental skills is and help them get some clarity, and then they can't really push against it. From there, they could just decide whether or not it's good for them.
What resonates with me particularly is how, compared to other aspects of training, people think it can just be solved really quickly. I'll just do this once and then I'm fixed. Going back to what you said, is I'm broken, I need to be fixed, and then I'm done. Whereas we don't use that logic if we go to the gym or in our nutrition. We don't say, I'm going to have a good meal and then I'm done having healthy, nutritious meals. I'm going to go to the gym once and then I'm fixed. I don't need to work out anymore. My muscles are fine.
I think you're adding a third one as well. So what I was talking about was more of the stigma around performance enhancement and mental health. But you bring up a real good, valid point. You don't try it one time and then the problem solved or your performance is fixed. These are things that you have to train just like anything. And if you really think about it, it's just the law of nature. The law of nature is you really can't get or don't get much better unless you practice what you do. There has to be some training. And so with everything and anything in life, unless you're just supremely gifted. So the more time you spend practicing with purpose and intention, the better skills you develop. And then hopefully those skills can lead to, for a performer, performing or playing a sport in a competitive setting and doing well.
What are some of the insights, lessons learned that are relevant for athletes or coaches that you learned during your time with the Mariners?
One of the things I found was that a lot of the coaches and general managers, they don't know how to use us. They just think mental skills coaches work with individuals and that's it. Or they might work in small groups, or they might do a team presentation here and there. The way I look at it is that I wanted to make a positive and profound impact on the team when it came to climate, when it came to chemistry, when it came to dynamics, when it came to cohesion. The primary interest where you're going to dedicate most of your time is with the athlete. Maybe number two are the coaches, and maybe it's a scouting department, player development, and so on. But we have to really have a conversation about what are the different ways that I could play a part in this organization, on this team, with athletes, with captains and leaders. And I did a lot of work around leadership and culture. So I had created what I called a leadership lab, where I grabbed one of my colleagues and buddies that I ran into at Joint Base Lewis McChord when I was working with First Group Special Force. And we knew each other back in the day from the Army Center for Enhanced Performance when he was working at West Point. So Andy Reese, I think he was a lieutenant colonel at that time. And I wanted to work with somebody else. It's always good to have a partner because they're going to catch things you don't. And so we're a good 1-2 tandem. I had the baseball college and I played overseas. That experience, I was a college baseball coach and I have the mental skills training. But he's leading men in combat. Like he lived and breathed leadership at the highest stakes on the battlefield when bullets are flying in volatile and unpredictable situations. And so we tag team it. We developed a leadership lab. Initially, we had 3 leaders and we put together an agenda. We gave some room and space. So how do we want to spend the time here? What do we want to do? What are the topics that we want to cover? And we did amazing things. Like we transformed the clubhouse. A lot of people at that time were just on their phones. There wasn't a whole lot of camaraderie. People were keeping to themselves. There was some drama going on during mid-season. And so we wanted to get people having fun, doing things together, talking. And so we went out and we bought a pool table, we bought a ping pong table, we set up tournaments. And this was also a sneaky way for me to have people train their mental skills before games, doing other types of events and other types of fun things besides just on the field. And so that's one of the initiatives we took. Another one was, I didn't know this, but in baseball, there's the big leagues and then AAA. But I didn't know, like, people go up, players and athletes go up every single day or just about every single day. Pitcher will go down, a new pitcher will go up. Someone gets hurt and they get on the injured reserve. Someone from AAA comes up again, and it's just continually on a daily basis. And so a lot of times there will be new players that didn't know the culture or didn't feel comfortable with the environment. So we had created a little task force to players that every single time someone new would come into our area and our space, we would sit down with them, we'd have lunch, we'd engage with them, we would have conversations, we'd teach them the ropes, we let them know about the do's or don'ts, we get them talking and thinking about what it means to be a good member of this particular team. And then we've even done stuff where we're coming close to the playoffs and we had a 50-50 split. And a lot of people were like on the fence. Let's say if there was 25 people, 10 people on the team were all in and they're going to give it their all, max effort, bought in, we can win. Let's say there are 10 people who are just like, screw this. I'm not getting my playing time. I'm not feeling this team, coach this, coach that. I'm getting the short end of the stick. And maybe there's 5 people on the fence. So I did a project where we got those 5 captains because we went from 3 to 5. And they went out and we identified who they would talk to and try to get those 5 people into the circle of like win. And so slowly over time, we started to get people to work more collectively, feel more part of the team, and I think perform as a result. So there's a lot of things that we do within the scenes. And that's the part I love the most is I love educating, but that's just one small piece. I'm in this business to help individuals and teams transform.
And so in those teams environments, like at a baseball team, for example, how much of the, let's say, the learning, coaching, skill development is happening in scheduled, fixed sessions versus spontaneous interactions?
Yeah, I think it changes from team to team. At that time I was working, every year was a little bit different, my scope, because we had new leadership in and old leadership out every single year. So the first year I'd worked with primarily the Seattle Mariners, and when they went on the road, the major league team, then I would go down 30, 45 minutes to Tacoma, which is AAA. And then if the Mariners were on the road and Tacoma Rainiers were on the road, then I travel 45 minutes north to the Aqua Sox to work with the short season A team. So every team, it might be one organization, but every coach is different. Every system is different. And no matter how hard they try to align and make things consistent. So sometimes I had office hours, like with the Mariners. And so you could schedule time to meet with me. I think that first year I'd met with something like 22 athletes and some people from sessions. They did some really good work. They were open to it. And I was just trying to destigmatize what it means to work with a mental skills coach. And so a lot of times my office was open and people would just come in. I had a couch, I had an egg chair, I had some pretty cool equipment, and we'd rap, we'd shoot the shit. We'd talk life outside of sports, but we'd also talk about sports and all the different mental skills and mental tactics that can help in like almost a impromptu small group setting. A lot of times too, though, I was always busy in the dugout. I was constantly talking to someone for, let's say, spring training, every single spring training game, the entire game. Someone was always coming up to me, asking questions, wanting to know, wanting more details, wanted a tip or a suggestion, or I was using that time to basically work on the relationship or get to know people so they would feel more comfortable with me around. To answer your question, it just depends. Not a great answer, but it really does. I think a mixture is really good. So have some office hours scheduled, but also I felt like I was on the clock working every single conversation. I was trying to figure out, like, how can I help this individual while still being authentic and genuine and not being all about the work. But every contact, every conversation mattered.
And I want to now go to another piece of your career, is a chapter in a book that you authored. It's called Deliberate Discomfort: How U.S. Special Operations Forces Overcome Fear and Dare to Win by Getting Comfortable Being Uncomfortable. And there's a chapter there called Suicide Bomber. Can you talk about the book as a whole, but more specifically, the main points in that chapter or the work that you were involved with?
Yeah. So the book overall is really a story of a young warrior searching for various tactics and skills and philosophies and attitudes to be successful as a professional warrior. In chapter 8, The Suicide Bomber, is about Flo Groberg, who I think he was in Iraq at that time, and he was escorting someone who was like a dignitary, and he was providing security and protecting this individual, he and his team. And a suicide bomber kind of got into the secure area. He tackled the individual. The suicide vest went off and I think killed most everybody there and severely injured Flo, but he survived. So he had to deal with that aftermath of feeling like he let his soldiers down. He had to talk to the families. He was a different person because he felt like he was injured and he wasn't the same, and he wasn't going to be able to do the same things that he did prior to that as a soldier in combat. And so he had a lot of survivor's guilt. There was another soldier, I think a double amputee, that comes into his room when he's feeling down and out and beating himself up and just hanging his head, and gives him a pep talk and rallies him and refocuses him and jolts him out of this depression and this pity and life sucks kind of mentality that rightfully he was in, if you can imagine. And so then I pick up and I start to talk about developing a soldier's creed and how the military has successfully used creeds. Like every single branch of the military has a creed: the Air Force, the Marines, the Army. The Army has like the soldier's creed. The Army has the Rangers creed. The Army has the Special Forces creed, drill sergeant creed. And these are all of their ideals, or the distilling the essence of their ideals and what they're about and what's important and who they should be and how they should act into one document. Let's say it's like maybe 8 to 10 lines, and they read it every single day. In fact, when I worked in the drill sergeant school, they used to lock up every single day, and all of the drill sergeant leaders would yell out the drill sergeant creed maybe multiple times a day until it's drilled into your head. And the things that you're reading and saying start to impact and influence how you are on your day to day. And so words matter. So going back to CBT, that if you are chock full of negative words, if you are pessimistic, if you are being sour or just having a lot of intrusive thoughts that aren't helpful, then how does it not impact your emotional state and the way that you treat other people and yourself and the way you act and behave? I was helping people develop their own personal creed. I really like this exercise because it just packs in a lot of mental skills in tightly: goal setting and values and purpose and positive self-talk and imagery, all into one document. It takes some time to really consider and think about it. What I've learned over time is I do a lot of exercise and activities, and through the activities and exercises that we do, that leads us to having all of these conversations that we need to have to be a mentally tough and complete, resilient, gritty athlete. I think it's an exceptional training tool. But for soldiers and warriors, it's more than that. They live and breathe it.
What's an idea or belief that you used to hold that you now disagree with regarding mental performance in the field of work, sports psychology, etc.?
Great question. It's maybe that when you're working with athletes and performers, like you have to just stick to the performance. There are people in our field who just feel more comfortable whenever it goes off topic. We're going to bring it right back to how does what you're talking about align with practice training or yourself as an athlete. But once again, for a long time, I felt like I was in a way helping, and I didn't want to feel this way, helping millionaires get more millions in a way. And I didn't want to feel like that. I got into this line of business because I used mental skills at a young age. I had a coach who had a master's degree in sports psychology. As a coach, I used it. As a player, I used it. My father taught me way back when. And I just wanted, it didn't even have to be sports psychology. I just know that I wanted to help people any way I could. And I think we're shortchanging people if we're just working on nothing but athletics, nothing but performance. You and I had this conversation. There's three areas. There's pathological, even though I don't like that word. So your clinical psychologists are going to work on DSM-5 TR kind of stuff and mental health problems. There's existentialism, and then a transpersonal. And so I feel like those two areas I really zero in on. Existential meaning like these bigger concepts and ideas and philosophies in life of what is purpose and freedom and anxiety and death and all these things that are stirring around us that don't get talked about. I will have those conversations. However, the main focus is on the performance on the field or wherever that may be.
And that also relates to, at the very beginning of our conversation, that you like to look at the person as a whole and not just separate out the athlete. And what you're saying there is the conversation that the athlete is having with you might not always be about their athletic performance, and we don't necessarily have to always pull it right back. So you're saying, okay, there's these other elements of this human being in front of me that are just affecting them on a larger scale.
Yeah. And then this is in line with the holistic approach that I use, also humanistic theory or therapy. But my main theoretical orientation is Asian psychology. And so that is really looking at 7 specific qualities. It's cultivating ethicality, it's transforming emotions, it's redirecting motivation, it's developing concentration, it's refining awareness, it's fostering wisdom, and it's practicing service to other people. So that is probably the staple or the centerpiece of how I operate. And so within that, you can see that I have some Buddhist psychology type of lens and framework that I'm mostly working from. However, like we had discussed earlier, it's important to be able to shift to, if you need to move to systems, if you need to move to brief therapy, solution focused, or some other one that the athlete can relate to, or that can give you a different way of overcoming impasses or not getting a good sense or full picture of what's occurring or developing, or if you don't know where to go. I think that is another thing to do, is to be able to shift into another approach.
What general suggestions or advice or a message you want to share with athletes or coaches in general about mental performance?
Mental performance, it's a stepping stone rather than a stopping place. If you are serious about making some improvements, whether that is in athletics or in life, is to reach out and get in contact with either a sports psychologist or a mental performance coach or somebody, with a wellness background to help you be able to work on various skills and capacities and aptitudes and abilities so that you could take more ownership over your life, so that you can make better decisions, so that you can live a more satisfactory life, that you are able to treat other people with more kindness and respect, especially in the world that we live in nowadays, where there's a lot of high level of selfishness and just really a lot of different factions.
What are some books that have had a big impact on your life? And secondly, what are current projects that you're working on or things that you're interested in?
Yeah, in high school, it was On the Road by Jack Kerouac and Dharma Bums.
Okay.
So those were two powerful influences. There's a book called Transcend, which is really interesting because I have, for a better part of a decade, have tried to clarify the fact that Abraham Maslow didn't stop at self-actualization. And then he didn't even create the pyramid that most people know and familiar with, that it was hijacked by some business person. And then later on in life, he also worked on it quite a bit as well and started adding other elements and other pieces. So it's on my bookshelf. It's Transcend. It's by Scott Barry Kaufman. It's an excellent book that tries to put a different spin on humanistic psychology. The Mind Illuminated by John Yates. He's a doctor. I think he has a couple different doctorate degrees, but also he's a master meditator. I think he's also like a Lama as well. Mindful Sport Performance Enhancement Model is a good one by Kaufman, Pinot, and Glass. Mindful Athlete by George Mumford. He's a dynamite, exceptional person. Altered Traits, if you're looking more for like the scientific underpinnings behind mindfulness and meditation. I use Mindfulness for Beginners, or I used to, in my Mindful Approaches to Performance class that I created. And then I love Pema Chodron. She has written quite a few books, but she has one, How to Meditate. And she is a beloved Buddhist teacher, American born. And she's real and she's profound. And her books are life altering.
And what are your current projects or things that you're working on at the moment?
The last few months, I've been in this writing phase. I rewrote my Mindful Approaches to Performance course. And right now I'm working on counseling skills and team building leadership. And then I have a bunch of other slated down the road. I'm trying to get back into ASP and do a couple presentations and workshops. And I have a couple podcasts, one with 4C guys out of Europe. And so I've been using their material for about 6 years now. And I use it in the summer camp where I work with our students every single summer for about 3 months, but then they come to like a fixed location in the Bay for 2 weeks and they get to try out mental skills in a program or workshop. And then I'm trying to get my business back up and running. But I have so much work that it's hard to do. But I feel like out of anything, that's where I thrive, is working with teams, working with leaders, working with athletes. Like I said, educating them, training them. But I feel like I have the skill set to really help people transform. And so that's what I love to do. And the business is in the beginning stages. I have the website and some other things, but now it's time to market and get a few more clients. So if you're interested, please reach out.
Dr. Gerson, I really enjoyed this conversation, really enriching experience for me, and I think for the listeners and viewers as well, learning about your approach and in general how we can use mindfulness, how we can use CBT really to help the individual. I think that's the main message I take away from it, is that we got to find a way to help the individual, meet them where they're at, and then use the appropriate tools at that time to work with that person. And so I really appreciate your expertise in this field and sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you for having me, Noah. It was a lot of fun. And hopefully you and I can stay in contact here in the near future and long future, and maybe partner up on a few projects would be fun too. So please reach out.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Coach Noah Talks. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the Golf Performance newsletter. This is where I share written, audio, and video content designed to help golfers take their game to the next level. All the relevant links from today's episode and to the newsletter can be found in the description.